I've been thinking about this because, like, clearly I've been sort of thinking differently of it than how you do through this project, sort of, because for me, we would just call it friluftsliv in Norwegian, like outdoor life. So you wouldn't really consider it outdoor education in a way. But I guess, I mean, strictly speaking, that is what I do whenever I, for example, take youths out for hikes and teach them stuff like that. So sort of an extension of that, I guess outdoor education is just, it's pretty straightforward really, right? It's just teaching people to be outdoors in a way. And I guess in a Norwegian context, it's sort of specifically aimed towards friluftsliv, or like outdoor life, how to be outside, basic philosophies like leave no trace, and sort of how to behave when you're in nature, how to be respectful of both nature and surroundings, but also people around you. I guess that's the most, yeah, I would say that's it basically. And also, I guess it also extends to, for example, if you go into like a cabin, like a DNT cabin, the Norske Turistforening, how to behave there and how to behave in the mountains and stuff like that. Well, not even in the mountains, it could be anywhere. But I guess, yeah, basically just being outside in different ways. But it could also encompass more stuff like climbing or running or whatever, but yeah. The first meeting with proper outdoor education would probably be when I volunteered I volunteered to the Norwegian Tourist Association, and then they offered loads of courses that you can do in order to become like a guide and stuff like that. So it started off with a basic introductory course that I did, where it was one weekend. We learned about using maps and compasses and how to navigate outside during night and stuff like this, and just very basic approaches to navigation especially, but also like ethics and how to behave outside. And following that, I also did a summer guide course, because they divide it into basic summer guiding and then winter guiding. And then during the summer guiding, I did that twice, 2 different times. One's just a basic one, and one aimed towards like alpine sports or activities. So more like with using ropes and traversing and that kind of stuff. So that was, I guess that was the first time I did that kind of sort of specific education. Before that, I'd learned most stuff by myself. So it was nice to sort of have someone to be there as a role model, and someone to sort of show you how to do things. You know, like get a role model of how to do something. That was what I enjoyed about it. And also it challenged your perceived views of what it is like to be outside, and it challenges you a bit, so that was very nice. I guess it depends sort of if they've done it before or not. Like I had this one interesting experience last summer, so this year, but the year before, 2024. I did this thing called hytte til hyttetur, or like an introductory course to that, where it was free for youths between 15 and 19, I think it was maybe 20, where they could apply for it and be given like a free 4-day hike, where we basically introduced them to what it's like to be hiking outside and going from one D&T cabin to another. And many of them had not been, some of them had been outside a lot and some of them had not. And it was one of the most striking things that I noticed, like in the end, was how all of them said, I wish it lasted longer. And then they also said that they hadn't been thinking about their phones, for example, you know, things like this, that they've been so caught up in just being in the moment that they hadn't really thought about outside impulses from social media and whatever. They hadn't really thought about using their phones. They were just enjoying that. So that's probably one of the more interesting changes I've seen. But then also, like this summer, we went to Patcherhytta with Irina and some of the kids from the asylmottak, what even is that in English? Where immigrant children are being for a period. And we were sort of giving them a similar thing, like an introduction to being at a cabin and being outside and outdoors and everything. And some of them, when we went down, I remember some of them said, I'm never going to do this again. But then apparently, but not too long afterwards, they'd started going for hikes, like started going for walks, which they hadn't done ever before. So clearly something happened. And often in my experience, there's these like subtle changes that they don't necessarily come immediately like, oh wow, this was life-changing. But it's maybe these little things that sort of lie there underneath and has this gradual change on you, or like at least an influence. So maybe you think immediately, oh wow, this sucks. But then the next day you think, oh, I want to do it again. I mean, I've had similar experiences, like when I ran my first marathon this summer. And as I was doing it, I was thinking, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done. Like, I'm never going to do this again. This sucks. But then 3 hours later, after I'd finished it, I thought, I have to do it again because I want to improve. And it was sort of fun as well, even though it was terrible. So it does these things to you, right? So that was very interesting. So I think it probably changes your like perception of things, and it's more than you maybe realize yourself. So that's what I find the most interesting. And it probably just puts you as an individual in like this bigger context of being outside in nature and seeing that there's much more to life than whatever you are experiencing, sort of. Yeah. That's a good question. So I've had some different experiences. I guess one specific thing is it's so nice to actually be able to communicate in some way, like having a interpreter or someone who can at least convey the message in their language or some sort of in some way. I had this in March this year. I was leading this thing called a base camp for DNT, which is basically like a week-long camp for kids between 13 and 16, I think it was, or something like that age group. We were just skiing and hanging out in the snow and staying at this cabin and just, you know, having fun. And there were two boys there who were Ukrainian refugees or immigrants who had only been in Norway for like 2 months. So their language was obviously not very good. And their English was not very good either. So we could sort of speak very basic English, but that was it. But all the other youths, they were Norwegian, so they understood everything. And that was challenging because every time we said something in plural, we still had to make sure that they got the message, and we almost had to like be with them more than the others just to make sure they actually understood what we wanted them to do, and that they got the same sort of that they got the same opportunities as everyone else. So that was challenging. But then, for example, when we did the young immigrants trip in the summer, or with the first journey people, you know, we all had the same language, or we shared a language experience, so we could actually communicate, and that was such a big difference. Even though like I had to say something, and then maybe Irina had to interpret it, and very interesting how I say something in Norwegian, and then she in like 10 seconds, and she spends like 30 seconds saying it in Ukrainian. But you know, at least you know that the information is being sort of transported, right? So that was probably the biggest challenge, I think. But the nice thing about working with like immigrants or people who are not native Norwegians is that they appreciate it so much. Right? I think a lot of like, especially Norwegians, they take it very for granted, all the things we have. You know, they go on a mountain and they're like, oh, this is cool, whatever. But then everyone else would say that this is great and this is beautiful. And you sort of just lose the perspective of things. So I appreciate that a lot. So it can be very impactful to take them on something that most Norwegians would think is just a basic boring trip. But that's probably the main difference, I would say, is the whole communication aspect. Yeah, because communication is important. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously language is one thing, but it's probably also just, what would you call it? Like cultural experiences and habits. Like, for example, the first journey trip that we did, where we guided a bunch of youth workers from all over Europe, right? Some of them were avid hikers and they'd gone for hikes, but they always said that if it's raining, I don't go out, or if it's windy, we don't go out. And then on one day when we were at Patchelhytta, it was raining and blowing. It was a really strong wind. It was a lot of rain, and they thought we just had to cancel everything and stay inside. But we went anyway, and it was great, and they enjoyed it. But I think if you're not used to the whole philosophy of the most important thing is how you dress, and that your clothes are there, then it could probably be a bit challenging at times to go for walks, especially on the west coast of Norway where the weather is terrible for a lot of the time. But yeah, I think that's basically it. I mean, language and the whole getting used to just the outdoor philosophy thing. Of course, another aspect is on the west coast, like here, it's a lot of steep terrain. So physically, it's more demanding. Like it's a lot of upwards going. While if you go to like the eastern parts of Norway or like Hardangervidda, it's a lot of flat terrain, and you can walk a long distance without it being so heavy on your legs. But here it often involves a lot more like challenging terrain and you walking in rocks and stuff. So it's just the physical aspect of it is probably a bit more challenging, I would say. So that's just, if they're not used to it, if they're from like the Netherlands or Denmark, then it's obviously going to be hard. Or Estonia, I guess they only have woods and forests and not many mountains. So yeah, it depends what you're used to, right? Yeah. I guess one, in my experience anyway, often it is seeing the participants, like being aware of who they are and actually seeing what they need and taking care of them. Because I know like professional guides, for example, they are sometimes renowned for like pulling up their participants or their clients like as fast as possible. Like let's say Matterhorn in Switzerland, like they want to go up to the top of the mountain and down again as quickly as possible so they can be done with it, and they just pull people up and they don't really enjoy it. And I think sometimes that can happen a bit, or you sort of forget that you have a bunch of people with you and that they all have different needs and experiences and perspectives. So I think one of the most challenging things is just seeing everyone. But that's also a challenge in itself, because if you see everyone, then you realize there's so many different needs and expectations, and it's kind of challenging. So the whole awareness thing is in itself tiring, but it's also like for safety reasons important. Like if you have someone who are very inexperienced and who expect like a very easy mellow hike, and then you're actually going to go like 500-600 meters of elevation and you're going to walk for 10 to 20 kilometers, that's going to be challenging. And then if they're not sort of not ready for that, it can go pretty badly. Or like, I mean, when we went back from Patchelhytta, right, a lot of them are not used to the whole terrain and walking for that long. So suddenly we have like one person who's twisted both his ankles and people falling over and all kinds of stuff, so that can be challenging if they're not used to it or expecting it. But I mean, that's also, I guess, part of the deal. I mean, I guess the most important thing is learning by doing, like actually doing what you're supposed to train. If, let's say we are teaching or learning about navigation, if you're not actually using a map and compass yourself and try to do what we talk about, there's no chance you're going to learn it. So I guess that's especially for outdoor education specifically, is you have to do the things you do. And sometimes I think it's better for someone to, instead of being told in advance how to do something, you just try something out. It's a bit like I know a lot of maths teachers, for example, and people who teach different types of sciences, like natural sciences, physics, whatever, often in order to sort of inspire the whole like exploratory aspect of the subject, they try to not give the students the keys to resolve everything immediately. They want them to like explore and figure out things, make mistakes and make experiences so that they can figure it out. And I've had similar, like I did this, I took this course 2 months ago in climbing about how to rescue each other or something if something goes wrong while climbing, so like a rescue course. And a lot of the things we learned, the teacher, he just said it once, he showed us very quickly, and then he basically told us to figure it out ourselves. That involved us doing a lot of mistakes, but it also meant that we learned what was not right. So, you know, we sort of got the whole process and not just learning everything perfectly from the start, because then you never make the mistakes that you also need to do, because sometimes you actually have to make a mistake to learn something. So that was very nice. So I think actually, I guess making room for actually making mistakes and sort of opening up for those mistakes to be not considered a mistake and just bad, but as a good experience. I guess that's probably one of the most important things, really, I would say. Yeah.